Released in 2017 and starring Charlize Theron, Atomic Blonde is an intermittently entertaining action film based on the graphic novel The Coldest City. Directed by David Leitch, the film has plenty of flair and some genuinely thrilling set pieces, but it's ultimately just a hollow imitation of the movies it desperately wants to be. It also illustrates that style alone isn't enough to save a film with nothing interesting to say. Atomic Blonde begins on the eve of the collapse of the Berlin Wall. A caption explains that in November 1989, the Cold War came to an end. A second later, an X is spray painted over it, and red words inform that this is not that story. And this winds up serving two different purposes. On one hand, it gives us a setting. It tells us where we are and when this is happening. On the other hand, it also serves as a mission statement. As the cover of New Order's Blue Monday plays, it becomes painfully evident that this movie's trying really hard to be cool. The story itself, which is mostly bare bones, starts with an MI6 agent on the run. It's a kinetically shot scene that we join already in progress. The agent is eventually caught, shot, and killed, and his killer steals a microfiche list he had concealed in his wristwatch. His death, and the mission to recover that list, sets things in motion, or acts as a MacGuffin if you will. That's when we meet Lorraine Broughton, played by Charlize Theron, in a knockout performance. Because she beats people up, that's a joke. Anyway, Lorraine heads to Berlin to recover the list. But as soon as she arrives at the airport, she gets made. Her handlers try to kill her in the backseat of a car. Needless to say, she escapes in a very over-the-top fashion, and it doesn't end well for those guys. Although it makes for a great scene, it seems that for a top-level MI6 agent, she gets found out pretty quickly. And that's where her not-so-trustworthy inside source, David Percival, played by James McAvoy, comes in. What follows is pretty standard spy thriller action. There's a lot of double crossing, dialogue with double meaning, and frequent cuts to a debriefing scene. If that seems like a very brief description of the film, it's because there's not really much more to the story, or it doesn't really stay with you very long. Atomic Blonde is a type of movie that is thrilling and forgettable at the same time. Its story all but evaporates from your memory as soon as it ends. But the thing is, the story is almost beside the point. The movie, which at times feels like a 2-hour-long music video, uses a flimsy plot to set up the next action scene, but at least the action is really enjoyable. Although it's not as much of a revelation as it was in Fury Road, Charlize Theron's performance is magnetic and visceral. She's the embodiment of badass, and there is something incredibly thrilling about watching her kick and punch her way out of situations. Theron is almost machine-like in her commitment to the role, for which she did most of the stunts. Director David Leitch is an ex-stuntman, and he has fantastic eye for action. The scenes are perfectly shot, and the action is the kind that keeps you on the edge of your seat. It's hard to look away, even when the bone crunch and violence makes you want to close your eyes. The use of shaky cameras, very reminiscent of Paul Greengrass's work on the Bourne films, is very effective. Even the sound is precisely employed for maximum impact. During the fight scenes, the background sound is almost entirely cut out, so only the fight itself is audible. The loud cacophony of punches and kicks, pummeling human flesh, the grunts, gasps, and painful screams come together to form an ear-splitting violent orchestra, and it's as perfectly composed as the fights themselves. But the problem is that it's too often reminiscent of other movies. It recalls everything from John Wick to La Femme Nikita. In one of the many fight scenes, the action occurs in front of a white movie screen, so the characters are seen mostly in silhouette. It's very striking, but an almost identical technique was already used in Kill Bill, and probably other movies to better effect. It also overuses one of the cheapest movie cliches of employing pop songs to fabricate excitement the movie can't generate on its own. Although the songs are actually great, they're also very obvious choices. It feels like the movie is trying really hard to make itself seem hip by association. Its attempts to be cool come off as transparent posturing that calls attention to itself. Sometimes it's hard to tell if you're watching a movie or a photo shoot for a magazine cover. The characters don't just stand, they pose, holding their cigarettes like props as the smoke hangs in the air just right. And neon lights are the only things the movie seems to fetishize, even more than violence. The scenes are framed in a way that the overused neon lights shine hues of pinks and blues on the characters in an over-stylized way. But there's something almost oddly entertaining about a movie that seems so confident about its own coolness when it really doesn't have the right to be. And it's about as subtle as one of Lorraine's violent punches to the face. Characters flat out explain things when subtext would have been a lot more effective. Other times, the movie uses visual cues that spell everything out for the viewer. I've seen the movie a few times, and I'm still not entirely sure I know what happened. It's not that it's hard to follow, it's just that it's easy to lose interest. By the time the movie reaches its conclusion, I've already stopped caring. Looking cool isn't enough if the film doesn't give the viewers a reason to care or to feel invested. Charlize Theron is magnificent and badass, but the same can't be said about the movie. Perhaps if the film was as confident as it tries really hard to appear, it wouldn't have felt the need to fill up every second with hollow signifiers or playing 1,000 overused pop songs. It feels like they decided to combine the action from John Wick, a movie David Leitch co-directed, with the aesthetic of Drive, and then went out for drinks? Perhaps they thought that if they copied two movies that rule, that their movie would too. It doesn't. Because in the end, all the style in the world can't save a movie that doesn't have anything interesting beneath its shiny surface, or hide the fact that it doesn't have anything cool to say.